has a little countdown there. It says 3, 2, 1, and you're supposed to. I'm not quite yet figured out the timing on it, but this is the Batman's revisitation of FGU's space opera game system circa 1979-1980. Fantasy Games Unlimited is actually still producing things to some degree, at least selling the products, the original products that they created back in the day. They have a website. Most of this stuff is accessible on PDF file. Also, I think you can get some of it through drive-by or drive-through gaming website. And if you go and look at the FGU's website, you can still buy some of this in the hardback form, which is a good thing as far as I'm concerned. Now, this particular Star Sector Atlas, number 7, is I don't want to call it an anomaly, but it's unique. Over the past week or so, I had a number of conversations on the video response channel with a few people, Rob Gusterson and others, on the topic of why game companies do not reissue or continue to issue new material for older game systems. It runs the gamut from economics and supporting their new system, and to legal issues and possibility of trying to not generate enough revenue for the effort expended in order to creating source book material. And I get it. That's one of the reasons in a lot of my videos that I preach the concept of adaptability, taking older stuff and adapting it to newer rule sets, because just because an older system, a newer system comes along, it doesn't mean that the older system doesn't have a lot of play value still. And for the most part, your mechanic heavy stuff, even your mechanic light stuff, can be overlaid over top of existing story material and support material with a little bit of adjustment. It was one of my reasons that I enjoyed Iron Crown Enterprises Middle Earth system so much, and to some degree their Rollmaster, was because of that mindset. In MERP, they actually took it upon themselves to give you the conversion charts in the first couple pages of each book, regardless of what it was. It gave you the conversion charts for using their Rollmaster system, using MERP's own game rule system, and for using the ubiquitous Dungeons and Dragons system without naming it by name. It would have been the modern day D20 stuff that we got today. Anyway, what makes this one a unique one, not necessarily the only unique part. It's the first of several coming out, to my understanding. I was contacted by Mr. Price here, Glenn Price, who's the writer and designer of this Star Atlas, and told that he recently cut a deal with FGU to write and print the missing Star Atlases from their lineup. They created upwards of 12 in number, but in reality there was 3 or 4, maybe 5 that it's about 3 or 4 that they didn't actually get around to printing. Rather, it was because the system lost momentum and they moved on to something else, or it was supplemented by the very popular D&D or Star Wars when it first came out, and Star Trek that Fastwell was putting out. It's hard to say, but I know that we hit a wall like a lot of game systems do. We hit a point where they intended to put out more, and they just didn't. It didn't get out. Here's an example of one of the original Atlases, Atlas 11. I have an Atlas 12, but I didn't have an Atlas 7 until now. So this is actually new material. This was one of the reasons I was having some of the conversations, or inspired to have those conversations with Rob and others, was that, to me, this was a good thing. This is a viable thing. Whether or not it's an economically sound thing for the company, I don't know. I can't argue one way or another, especially if an ongoing game system. Now, that being said, when you look at the volume of game systems that were created by these various companies over the years that ended, they reached a wall and they stopped. They didn't produce a second version or a 5th version like we have on some currently going on now. So those venues, those systems are still viable game systems for those who can get the material, which you can get fairly cheap off the internet, but there's nothing new. So The company in this case is benefiting from Mr. Price's hard work. There's the potential for a resurgence in interest in their game system, bringing old players back to the table by suddenly seeing something new and thinking, gee, I want to dust this stuff off and pull it out and maybe run some games in it, or potentially bring in new people altogether who would then approach the company looking to purchase the original stuff that they still print, that you can still get some in hard copy and PDF formats that they're making a profit off of. Now, they're not investing a lot into it because they've moved on. So there's that. I'm still having that argument. And this one here is Starless 7, the Blarad Starkingdom. The Blards are the Ursoid race that are actually quite pragmatic and adaptive. They show a lot of traits that where they could be aggressive, and one would assume that they follow a lot of the generic, what we perceive a bear to be. There's some similarities there, but there's some obvious differences too. The Blards their star kingdom is based on a monarchy system. The population is quite free to do pretty much what they want within the rules of the laws of the land. The Blards are from a high gravity planet. They prefer higher gravity planets, which a lot of other races don't, which gives them a niche advantage of being able to move in to a region or a sector and settle planets that others tend to underutilize or avoid altogether because of their high gravity. The works to their advantage in aspects of when they have alliances with like the Mechpers and some of the other star empires that are more conducive to the lower gravity planets. They cut deals with them where they'll tell the Mechpers of a lower gravity planet, and the Mechpers will pass on the information for a higher gravity planet, and both empires benefit from this. The Blards are also quite aggressive when provoked. They tend to try to avoid overt combat. They're not an aggressive militaristic society in general, but they will come at you, and they will come at you full force, and much to the chagrin or the shock of some of their opponents over the centuries. There are they have three primary foes that they show little inclination of trying to cut a deal with anymore. It's the obvious crabs, the Clacons, and the bugs, and the Azrak Star Empire. The Azracs made a mistake at one of their early encounters. They were chasing some GPR ships, and these ships were damaged, and they sought repair at a Blarad outpost. The Blarad commander reluctantly allowed them to do so. When the Azrac fleet showed up, he asked them to leave. The Azracs ignored, attacked the GPR. There was a battle, and then pursuant of interstellar law, the commander of the Blarad garrison refused to turn over the crews of the damaged ships were on the surface. So the Azracs basically invaded the planet, captured the GPR crewers by force, executed them, and then turned around and attacked the colony and pretty much wiped it out. The Azracs made a mistake and misjudged what kind of reaction that they would get from the Blards. They had never encountered them prior to this as a star force, as a force to be reckoned with. They assumed that the Blards would respond in kind by attacking or raiding a few outposts or colonies or mining operations or something like that. So, much to their utter shock, when the Blards declared high war on the Azrac Empire, and then took a stab at their heart, launched their fleet and their very prodigious ground army into Azrac space. Unfortunately for the Blards, they come up against the Azrac's much bigger, larger, and superior navy, and almost lost the battle, so to speak. It wasn't for the intervention of the UFP or the United Federation of Planets, who helped the Blards stage their fighting withdrawal. The Blards might have found themselves in a different set of history books at the moment. The thing about the Blards is that they're methodical and slow about a lot of things, but they're quite adaptive. They learn from their encounters. When they first encountered the Clacons, they didn't quite know what to deal with them, how to deal with them. They were undergunned to some degree. Their ships were smaller. When they came back on their second engagement, they came back with bigger ships and bigger guns. They learned. They also learned to think outside the box. One of the problems with Clacons, these crustacean-based aliens, other than the fact that they look at everybody else as a meat source, is that when they colonize any world with significant bodies of water, and in the process, they're as part of uh, their breeding geology, their system, they release their eggs into the ocean, and this allows for repetitive birthing of generations that can come even after when you think you've eliminated the Clacons. They can keep coming back at you over time. They can reconquer a planet because it's just so hard to track them all down. And the Blards figured out, well, if these things are crabs, fish like crab eggs. So they biogenetically engineered some fish that were inclined to go directly after the source, and then turn them loose on as many of these planets as they encountered the Clacons on, helping reduce the problem of resurging Clacon dominance on planets by consuming their eggs that are at sea. So there's an example of the Blards thinking outside the box and adapting and overcoming one situation. The Blards also encountered their encounter with the Mechpers is another example. Leery of having a bunch of problems with yet another new alien race, the two groups got together, and the ambassadors were tiptoeing around each other, not quite sure what to make of each other. The Blards were not impressed by the Mechpers. Meat-heavy diets. The Mechpers were not impressed by the Blards' somewhat gruff exteriors and personalities. It wasn't until they noticed that the senior ambassadors noticed a bunch of their juniors at a nearby table, basically getting drunk on tasting each other's liquors and wines and stuff, that they realized that they did have something in common, and they staged a impromptu interstellar wine tasting contest. I guess what is it? Event, an interstellar wine tasting event. And from that, they discovered that they did have quite a bit of things in common, and a lot of their interests, while similar, didn't always overlap. The fact that the Blards are from heavy gravity planets, the Blard 3 is a 3.0 gravity, so it's 3 times Earth standard. They prefer higher gravity planets to lower gravity planets, and the Mechpers the other way around. So it's over time the two kingdoms have shared information on conducive environment potential colonial worlds, and to mutual benefit. They've also negotiated trade deals, exchanges of technology and research and information, and worked together on a number of occasions to defeat common foes. This is typical of the Ursoids, of the Blards mindset. It does help that the Mechpers have a feudal system and the Blards have a monarchy, so there's a lot of similarities in their government and how their governments approach things. Couldn't be so much said with Renan. The Blard had come in at a time when the Renan, which I reviewed a lot in theirs, about how they almost got wiped out by the Clacons and then the bugs, and then the Blard stepped in, trying to be the big brother, so to speak, and ended up getting it thrown back in their face at some point. So we got Communist Revolt, the Second Bug Raid, or the Fourth Interstellar War, the Human Supremists versus the Ursoids, the Blard World Army, Star Navy, Blard titles by rank, Long customers, impact of biology on Blard Custer, and then we have 52 odd planets that run the gamut of heavily populated to lightly populated. Some are extreme environments, some are very conducive. Many planets have, in Blaird's space, have sentient original native populations, and the Blards have been able to, in a lot of cases, incorporate them and into their star empire, into their star kingdom, without a whole lot of problems that would often come along, because they encourage and they encourage and nurture these lower tech nations, if you will, trying to help them to get to the star age, to the higher tech levels, without wiping themselves out, and in the process, and allow them to rule themselves semi-anonymously, as long as they acknowledge membership to the kingdom. And so far, for the most part, it's paid off. We see some ships from one of these associate kingdoms, the Triss vassal state. This is an alien race that they encountered, of methane breathers. Once again, they've encountered a species of spacefaring aliens, were able to work together with them and develop a relationship that prospered, that benefited both sides. It helped that the methane breathers were more interested in planets that methane-based planets, where the Ursoid, being air breathers, preferred oxygen-based planets. So they worked out for both sides quite well. Now, like I said, I was posting one of my ads, telling people that I had just posted one of my revisitations on space opera, and I got an email from Mr. Glenn Price, the creator of this book, letting me know that he had, in the process of he had wrote this one, and it was been published, and then he was in the process of writing Atlas number 9, I believe, which is due out within the next year, and potentially future other material. I had a good conversation with him, was impressed by the fact that the FGU was still in the business. I hadn't taken it upon myself to actually go in and do some deep research on them like I should have. I made the assumption that they stopped, since I hadn't seen any of their stuff on the shelves in a long time, that they basically bellied up. The company's still going, it's just quiet. A quiet company, and that they're allowing new material to be produced for an old game system was impressive, and gave some credence to my comments on why perhaps some of these other bigger companies could take note of that. But that's neither here nor there. Mr. Price did a credible job of taking the style of the original stuff and not allowing modern day politics and views on things to color it. So it's written and it's very well, nicely written and laid out, and it in the traditional space opera vibe. So it blends real well with the existing material from the older stuff. Very good and very nice to have. This, like I said, is This is a new product for a 40-year-old game, a 38-year-old game. So it's a plausible thing. Just saying, right? And I'd like to see more companies take that view on things, and I'm looking forward to seeing more of Mr. Price's stuff, and potentially additional material coming out. The positive, if I haven't already said it, and I'm not trying to sound like I'm rehashing the same thing over and over again, that Mr. Price, his work and his efforts, benefits the company, benefits FGU by providing new material for an old system. So older game enthusiasts like myself who have the collection can add missing pieces, or pieces that were missing. Now we have an additional piece to the game system. It also inspires us to pull those out, dust off the game system, and find people that want to play it, try to play the system. The other advantage of this is new stuff props up and it draws new blood. New people come in and look at this system and go, oh, I like the game system, I'd like to play this. And the game company itself has very little overhead in the aspect that they've already done all the original stuff. They're not intending to reintroduce all the original stuff as a new version. Now, I imagine if maybe enough people come along and started buying these things up and there was a resurgence, the game company might reassess that situation and bring it up to the more modern age. But it's not necessary. It's not necessary to do that. They can continue to sell the original stuff. They can run a new print. Print on demand is a good example of that. They can continue doing the PDF versions of it and still make a coin off of it. They're still making profit off of something that they created decades ago. And this is proof right here that it's a feasible thing. You know, I'll never know the numbers, how well this will do or not. It doesn't matter. I know that Mr. Price sold one of them because I bought it. I bought it. And if I bought it, 1,000 other nut jobs like me will buy it. And 1,000 other nut jobs will buy it. You know, there's $10,000-$20,000 worth of profit to somebody. So there you have it, Atlas number 7.